Aloha Nui. Yeah, continuing on part two of a review of Hawaiian history, especially as connected to political myths. Again, making sure that again, if you didn't have a strong background, right, Hawaiian history, make sure you order those readings, NEA readings, the Apology Bill, and of course, there's tons of readings and videos that kind of help you to review so-called history, uh, especially during the Hawaiian Kingdom period. So, again, with that context, let me continue on. 1820 is the arrival of the so-called first missionaries to the islands. And again, we must remember this happens after one of the political events after so-called Battle of Kuamo'o. Let me kind of go back to that. So if you remember the Ainoa or the free eating is when the battle between the traditional forces and the new forces, which with guns and cannons, led by the Kahumanu faction who go to war in Kona, and really over the question of the breaking of the Aikapu. And the traditional side is defeated, and whereby the destruction of the temples and the religious order, yeah, through the kapu system, is overthrown. And so there's a period of vanquish, period of really um, chaos, probably the best way to describe it. If you think about the religious and the legal law, everything to do with how society is governed has just been overthrown. But it act, of course, through liho liho, and I mean, those are the things you should already have uh, learned. Anyway, just to continue on. And so when the missionaries arrive, again, people have this idea that missionaries came and destroyed that part of the traditional religion, and that's not true at all. Yeah, by the time the traditional religion was already overthrown, the missionaries come in roughly about 6 months later after the passing of Kamehameha earlier also. So when they come into Hawaii, Hawaii is a place of really chaos in regards to religion and what holds the fabric of society together. And when the missionaries first come, they come out of New England, connected with Yale College, and Calvinists, very strict, and they never had any kind of sense of joy. I mean, probably the best way to describe their religious teachings. And so when they first come to Hawaii, they have a really difficult time. They have a hard time kind of getting their feet in to get converts. And it takes a couple of years. And it's actually only when William Ellis, who comes from Tahiti, who had been in Tahiti, and he understands Tahitian language and Tahitian culture, he understands really that it's really to use literacy, one, and second is to go after the ali'i. And this is how you can transform society. And this is what they do. They come to Hawaii, it takes a few years, eventually able to convince Liho Liho to give them some of like Liho Liho's lesser cousins, is probably the best way to describe him. Kind of, he doesn't want to deal with the missionaries, and so he kind of pushes off his cousins to go and be with him. And quickly they become not just converts, but they become religious leaders within even the Hawaiian community. From this, as we said, a new mana that comes from the so-called God Jehovah with the Calvinists. And quickly, the missionaries use really literacy, yeah, the power of reading and writing becomes really the tool of conversion. Um, Mindful also, that Hawaiian depopulation is having a terrible period where I mean, virtually they describe whole valleys and families would die and perish because of various diseases. So things are in turmoil, people are dying, and this new religion becomes a kind of tool, a way for the masses to turn to, especially these missionary who come with the idea to transform them. Yeah, ho'ohuli, as we say in Hawaiian. Well, one of the mythologies, of course, also is these missionaries came in love and they saw the so-called brethren, and the idea that, well, when you actually look at their actual words that they write, it's really clear that when examples, the leader here, Hiram Bingham, when he comes, he has a lot of negativity towards so-called the native peoples, the Kanaka. That's his own quote here, to show you that they did not come in a sense of equality and love, but already came with the sense that they were trying to transform the Hawaiians because they saw them as being less than human, yeah, as so-called savages, yeah. The appearance of destitution, degradation, and barbarism among the chattering and almost naked savages was appalling. I mean, the idea, like, just to look upon the Hawaiians was My gosh, appalling. Some were numbered with gushing tears, turned away from the spectacle. Others with a firmer nerve. I mean, again, the idea just to look at Hawaiians was this how terrible. Continued gaze, but were ready to exclaim, "Can these be human beings?" Charles Stewart, another so-called missionary, as you can see in his language, as he says, um, kind of homoerotic. In fact, I kind of look at his words describing when he's seeing the so-called naked figures and wild expression of countenance, their black hair streaming in the wild as they hurried the canoe over the water with all the eager action and muscular power of savages. Their rapid and unintelligible exclamations and whole exhibition of uncivilized character gave to them the appearance of being half man and half beast, and irresistibly pressed on the thoughts the query, can they be connected man with the brute? So an important element is to remember this. Yeah, the so-called missionaries that come um, to Hawaii, come with this mentality of supremacy. This is racial supremacy at its core. So for me, it's very clear. We must always understand the coming of Christianity to Hawaii was based upon these philosophies of racial supremacy and religious bigotry. Rufus Anderson later on, just to kind of talking about language, especially. But I think important piece as you hear. Let me sorry, the one quote in the middle. Yeah, I cannot suppose there is a design, again, design like a plan to bring the Saxon race, yeah, Anglo-Saxon, the white race, basically, into supplant the natives. So again, the language of supplanting is part of that colonial enterprise, settlerism, right? Whether it's in Australia or South Africa or Rhodesia or New Zealand and so forth, where the so-called idea is that the white man would come to supplant, and supplant, of course, means to replace, take the place of. Yeah, ethnic cleansing is nothing new. Well, during this time, it's an important date. Probably the most important rule in the Hawaiian Kingdom period was under Kamehameha III. His name Kau Ikeaoli. He's the younger brother of Liho Liho. So Liho Liho, right? He goes off to England with his wife Kamamalu, and they die there because of measles. And his younger brother Kaui Kiaole, who's resident in Lahaina, kind of a transition between the very old system, and he's going to transition to a new system, a constitutional monarchy system. So most of the greatest changes that happened in Hawaii during the Hawaiian Kingdom period happened under the rule of Kamehameha III, along with his sister Nahi Ena Ena, a royal sister who at one time were actually meant to have married and had children together. But while Kawikioli, as a young man, he's actually a good student under William Richards, one of the missionaries also. So if you're familiar with Lahaina, your Waiola Church, you have what's Malu'ulu Olele, what used to be the was a large playground, a large field, but that was actually the site of Moku'ula Island, yeah, which was a little small freshwater lake that you had in that area, and the residence of the Ali'i was on a small island called Moku'ula, right there in Lahaina. And Lahaina, in fact, was the capital of Hawaii at this time, and mainly because Lahaina was a very important port, easy to get to, and this is the time period of the whaling season and the merchants that were coming through Hawaii at that time. So Lahaina, in fact, was the capital of the islands. But it's here also where Kahumanu continued on as the Kuhina Nui, as the prime minister. The greatest changes, he's going to transform the Hawaiian Kingdom into a constitutional monarchy. He sets up what, one of the earliest, in fact, if not the earliest, as some have argued, systems, and we talk about government system of compulsory education. And again, compulsory education means that everybody, in fact, between the ages of 4 and 15 had to go to school. Everybody had the right to go to school. Now, we have to compare this to other parts of the world. Again, 1825, um, most of the world was illiterate, one, and two, education was really only for males and the wealthy, the aristocrats of society. Education was a tool for those who wanted to continue the power to govern. Education and so, but in the Hawaiian Kingdom, yeah, it's important to understand that it's very Hawaiian thinking, in fact, that education was something for everybody, male, female, and on all ages. And quickly, literacy transforms a society whereby Hawaii becomes one of the most literate, if not the literate, society in the world at that period. The earliest so-called treaty, relationships we set up with the United States specifically in 1826. Yeah, the Treaty of Friendship basically says that we're gonna trade with one another. And you got to remember, in 1826, the United States was little more than 13 colonies at that point. But the Hawaii would trade with the United States and vice versa. They would not, of course, rob each other, and the idea was protection of trade. Yeah, but that happens in 1826. The important date for all of us we should review and remember, of course, is how the Declaration of Rights in 1839. So the Hawaiian Kingdom will transform from a kind of traditional absolute monarchy where the so-called mo'i or the king had divine right to decide everything. Now they're going to start to divide up the political power, the economic power of these islands. Yeah, and using, again, starting off with the British form and slowly kind of transitioning into this kind of hybrid governance structure, very traditional in the Hawaiian sense, but again, kind of fitting into a British system. And that's the kind of best way to look at it, including taking things like common law, British common law with land title. First of all, they say there are three so-called persons or vested classes. They have people with title to the land and the government, the ali'i, all the chiefs, and the ho'aina, the people of the land, the so-called native tenants, all had rights. Now, what's important about this is these vested rights were given by Kamehameha III. This is many people would call a bloodless revolution. Here's Kamehameha III, who owns everything. He owns all the lands, but now he says a third of everything belongs to who? The common person. Now, you won't find this history in any other part of the world. Wasn't in Europe, it wasn't in England, France, but no one else said, okay, I'm the king, I have all this land and all this money, and I'm going to give everybody a third interest. Now, that's a very important aspect because it shows, from our indigenous ways of seeing the world, the idea we all share in the so-called land is very a cornerstone of our society and our culture. The idea of we all have rights to lands is not something that was imported, but something that's indigenous to Hawaii. And that's followed in 1840 by the first Hawaiian Kingdom Constitution. Yeah, and what's important about this Constitution, 1840, starts off by declaring that, in fact, I think I have the next line, sorry. Yeah, so just to show you the opening lines of the Kumu Kanawai, which is a constitution. So for 1841, Hawaiian Kingdom now has a very Western European copy of society that they're going to use governing. They're going to use a constitution. So it's no longer the king or queen having the absolute authority to decide, but their decisions and their powers will be limited by paper, yeah, with a constitutional form. Now, this is very early on. If you were to compare it to other parts of the world, Hawaii is actually very early on moving towards from a monarchy, in fact, into this kind of form of a monarchy that's, again, still a monarchy, but very much, if you look at it, very much like the British monarchy in that sense. Yeah. But as the opening lines say, yeah, "Wahana mai kia kua in lahui kanaka apau," that God has made all the different nations, all of them, ike kokoho kahia, as one blood. E noho like kako makahonua ne meke kuikahi a meka pomeke, that we all shall dwell, yeah, in peace and unity. But an important point is that when the Hawaiian Kingdom said that we are all equal, all peoples are equal, this is a foundation on the Hawaiian Kingdom period, but also in practice in law. Now, all you got to do is compare the United States in 1840, who talk about equality and the pursuit of happiness and so forth in their constitution. But it's pretty apparent and clear in 1840, there was no kind of real concept of equality for all. You know? Equality meant really, very basically wealthy white males were considered equal. Did not consider American Indians, of course, were still not just savages, but non so-called citizens, and of course slaves, who had been negotiated to being counted as three-fifths of a human being. So the point I'm making is that the idea of equality was not something that was imported from the United States. In fact, was at that time very clear. It's the Hawaiian Kingdom who, in our Constitution, when we said equality, it did mean equality in practice. Yeah, historically. Yeah. The 1840s Constitution also, what's important is it sets up the three branches, the king, the legislature, judiciary. But again, it declared that all land held in common by king and the people. And again, it's a big point. In other words, all land, ALL, all land belonged to who? Yeah, the king and all the Hawaiian the people. It was a vested right. It was something they were given title to. A vested right is a title you give to the people that you cannot take back, right? It's theirs to use and decide upon. It also began the idea of representative body elected. And here's a picture of Kina'u, a granddaughter of Kamehameha first, but later she's actually the third. Sorry, this is not Kina'u. This is Kekau Onohi. Yeah, Kekau Onohi is also a granddaughter. Yeah, uh, but she was the prime minister, a female again. Again, as you can, she was a third in this line, so it's very apparent. And again, what does a prime minister? They ran the government. In other words, they would be like the president of the United States. So early on, we had females running, controlling the political governance of a people. Yeah. The idea of equality of women to run function again is very, very Hawaiian. That women not just participating in politics, but actually taking a leadership role in politics is very, very Hawaiian. And again, you can compare this to the United States, which to this day has yet to have a president that's a female. But Kekawanohi is the person who signs the Hawaiian Kingdom Constitution. So yeah, again, a female signs the Hawaiian Kingdom Constitution. In other words, there's no doubt the progressiveness of the Hawaiian Kingdom, whether by all people being equal and by the role of women. Yeah. So again, the point being, this is not something at all that was brought to Hawaii. It's something that's very indigenous to these islands. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize the amount of Hawaiian language books and the ways in which education, academics, and study blew up, all over the place. And everything you can read, all the classic books and stories in Hawaiian language. You can read about the Civil War if you wanted to, in a daily account of what's going on in the United States. You can read Ivanhoe, and you can read Tarzan, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea. You want to read Hamlet. Shakespeare was translated into Hawaiian. As you can see that, when we think about the Hawaiian Kingdom period, and especially Hawaiian language documents, it's clear that the Hawaiians were very, very worldly, if not the most worldly, I would probably argue, in regards to the amount of literacy in the society and the amount of information that's coming into these islands. Very, very educated and literate. And that's the legacy of the Hawaiian Kingdom. From again, newspapers and books, and early on from 1834, the first Hawaiian language newspaper. Here's an article, of course, describing the hippopotamus. Yes, something that's interesting to people who were here. And again, whether it's medical textbooks or you want to read history books, you want to read a story about Abraham Lincoln. Again, they're all translated into Hawaiian. The first big, and I make sure you guys, when you watch um, Pa'akeaupuni. Yeah, that's that cartoon video. Our link show about Hawaiian history. Also, very important, easy way to review history. They also go more into detail with the Paulette affair. So I don't go too deep into this, but this is again when the British will take over Hawaii for about 6 months. Lord Paulette comes in using gumboot diplomacy. He's in a confrontation over title and ownership of some lands, even though yet at this point there were no foreign ownership of land. He's trying to basically force the issue to make sure that some British citizens were paid and received some lands, and using their cannons, they basically force Kamehameha III to um, yield his authority to the British government under protest. And this is what he does for about 6 months. So really, the British control Hawaii for about 6 months. The Hawaiian flag is taken down, British flag is put up. While this is going on, we're going to talk about, we know in 1841, 1842, the Hawaiian Kingdom already is looking to secure its recognition as an independent nation state. So we already sent out emissaries to Europe. That's already going on. And we'll talk about that. Yeah, in 1842, they actually meet with President Tyler. So the Hawaiians are already moving out to go and get recognition of independence. At the same time, they're dealing with this question here. Well, eventually, word gets back to Britain in England, and then they send Admiral Thomas, who comes in, saves the day, and he comes in, tells Paulette, take down that British flag, put the Hawaiian flag back up, and he returns hoi hoi on July 31st, 1843. July 31st, 1843. That's why we have La Hoi Hoi, yeah, the return of sovereignty day, whereby Kaui Keauli, Kamehameha III, this is when he proclaims those words, Ua mau ke ea oka aina i Kapono. Yeah, the sovereignty of this land, the independence of this land will continue on by being virtuous, yeah, by being pono. Pono will be forever rule this land, in other words. Yeah. Now, as you do right, it's going to continue on. And from that point on, the question of Hawaiian sovereignty becomes a very, very important issue, right? Because how will Hawaii deal with foreign powers like Great Britain, which were a kind of protectorate for a while? Well, probably the most important date you all should know, again, is November 28, 1843. What's called Hawaiian Independence Day, La Ku'oko'a. And this is where by Great Britain and France, through the Anglo-Franco Proclamation, right, they recognize, they proclaim that Hawaii is an independent nation state. It's a co-equal, it's a part of the family of nations. Hawaii really is the first non-European nation state. Yeah, and this is a huge accomplishment. There's no other Pacific nation states. Hawaii was a so-called recognized nation state in the international community before there were any in China. There was no Japan. There was no any of the African nations and the Asiatic nations. And basically, Hawaii, the first non-European state, by virtue of using its own politics through their important emissaries. Yeah, the first is Timoteo Ha'alilio. Yeah, Ha'alilio was the Hawaiian emissary who's, and it's a long story, it's kind of a sad story, but he's sent out by Kamehameha III to go out and secure Hawaii's independence. And you got to think, I mean, how the heck is he going to do this? Well, with the help of William Richards, a former missionary, and George Simpson, who's a ship captain, and three of them are giving that the charge, and they make their way across the United States. 1842, meeting John Tyler, they go across the United States, go off to Europe, and they use politics and work the powers to be, and they basically play the powers off each other, right? The United States, who's a blossoming power, along with France, England, and Belgium, in fact, is used to convince that the best thing in their interest is foreign policy. In fact, was to recognize Hawaii as an independent nation state. So from that day on, independence Hawaii now is a co-equal. So when you think about independence and sovereignty for Hawaii, it's a misnomer. It would miseducate to say, "Oh, Hawaii is seeking independence." Hawaii already had attained independence back in 1843, and this is a huge cornerstone, especially in regards to issues of today. Yeah. So, and I would obviously say that you cannot really understand issues of Hawaii today, or Hawaiian specifically, without understanding what happens in 1843. What happens when you attain independence and sovereignty. It's also later on in the year where you have the first Mahele Nui, the great division of lands. And I want to go, again, probably look at Pa'akeaupuni would be the best to kind of give you background. That's how it is. But this is when the system provided the division of lands, yeah, into what do you call it, the power of alienation, the right to sell and actually own lands. And the big thing to kind of remember is that those three classes, yeah, the government, the ali'i, and the maka'ainana, the ho'aina, all have a one-third interest. I want you guys to remember that all lands, I repeat, all lands, ALL, all lands, they have a one-third interest. In other words, if you took a land like Waikapu, I'm going to take Waikapu on Maui, the whole Ahupua'a. Who owned Waikapu? Well, a third belonged to the government, a third belonged to whoever the ali'i or konahiki might be of that land, and a third also belonged to the native tenants, meaning the people of the land who were residing on those lands. And this was recorded with a condition of title, hence the words koi na kulia no okanaka. Sometimes you may hear koi no na'e ke kulia no kanaka. Koi meaning reserve the rights of the people, meaning that the rights of the people to those lands were encoded into the title. Now, what were the rights would be? Things like right to access, right to gather, right to water, right to collect, to fish and so forth. So, an ahupua'a like Waikapu, the idea that the people had a right to the entire ahupua'a for those uses. Yeah. They also provided in which the native tenant had a right to claim lands. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but just to kind of show again a right to full use. So to think about in the Hawaiian why we have particular rights. And again, this was developed separate. This has nothing to do with American U.S. law, common law. Kind of came off of a sense of common law. But what's important again to understand is that from the very foundation of private lands, all ALL, the rights of the common citizen were encoded into that land, titled into the land. So all land titles in Hawaii has that condition of title. I repeat, all have that condition of title. It's not Kalekoa's story, it's the actual history that. So we think about what's going on in Hawaii today. Anytime you talk about access and gathering, protection of burials, and so forth, or ownership, land time, that's why you have all these issues surrounding in Hawaii. And the truth is, you can easily showcase the physical evidence. It's not my interpretation. I can actually show you the document where it says it. Koi no naike kulia no kanaka. Yeah, so we can look at something like Mauna Kea or Halakla, recent events in Hawaii. Well, it's not just the issue of telescope. The question about who actually owns the land, what is the right of the common person to land, is already encoded in those original title documents. So it's not like you're adding Hawaiian or the common people to those titles. They're already from the very foundation where they became private, when it was became awarded. That condition of title was already on. So the Hawaiian Kingdom government also, right? They received lands. And again, I'm going real quickly through this piece here. The Land Commission was formed, and the Land Commission basically was called Land Commission Awards (LCA). And what they did was to review the application for these awards, and would basically say, "Yep, that confirms," or would say that person, didn't have title. And really, this is a process by the common person, so they could get their own piece of the pie. And basically, what they could claim up to 5 acres was land that they had been using. So today, a lot of these lands we call kuleana lands. Yeah, kuleana. Kuleana lands are lands, most times you find around streams, you find where people were actually living, their house lots, what they were farming, where they were gathering material, and they may have different pieces or called apana. And that kuleana was something that would be awarded to them. So even to this day, you hear Hawaiians talking about their rights to kuleana lands. And this is what it comes from. Now, it's also clear, according to title, kuleana lands have the highest level of scrutiny because they went to the highest level of scrutiny, they have the highest level of title. And that's a very important issue because even to this day, you find there's a lot of, again, modern issues dealing with the question of title, rights of access and gathering, in which the lawful title of those lands are given vested, cannot be taken away. And this is where you have these kinds of conflicts today. Another word you might hear people talk about, royal patent. So really what a royal patent is just a confirmation process in a simple way, confirms the title. And really what it is, it has to do with the quit claiming of the government's title. Remember, government has a one-third interest also. For example, in Waikapu, to get the government out of Waikapu, you're basically going to pay off the government. Either you're going to buy them out by cash of the value, one-third value, or I'm going to give you a one-third value of land interest. And so a lot of times that's what would happen. You would return a third interest would go to the government. This became Hawaiian Kingdom government land. This is how you had government lands start to accrue in these islands. Kuleana Act, I just talked about that, is subject to rights of, and again, this is not collect, as you can see, all lands identified and separated were all subject, all lands again. So not, this is not just some lands, all lands, ALL. Now, the point is that this is very different from American land tenure. Yeah, American land tenure comes in way after. So the Hawaiian Kingdom land title is a hybrid system between the traditional, yeah, that's why you have words like kuleana, and the rights of native peoples and this kind of modernization process. 1850 is also when aliens begin to have the right to own fee simple land. Well, where are these lands located? As you can see, here's some examples of crown lands. So the crown lands were lands that were first given to Kauai Keaoli, that's passed on to Commander Fort. This goes with the crown. That's the ones in yellow. And in the green are all these government lands. These are lands that were, as I just explained, yeah, where the government started to accrue title to lands. But you can see in a place like Maui, almost all of East Maui, you look at South Maui, Kaikinui through Bakena, look at Oluwalu from the Pali area, North part are all Hawaiian Kingdom government lands. Again, who else has a right in all Hawaiian Kingdom government lands? That's right, the whole island. Remember, they also still have a third India. I repeat, they also still have a third interest India. That's on the books. And you can look at TMKs to this day, just kind of look, and you can see today you have a modern map. But if you look closely, even to this day, you can see all these little kuleana lands that are listed here in the bottom left here. So these are issues that we still deal with today. If you don't understand land tenure, it's hard to understand the kind of issues over land ownership that goes on today. And crown lands, of course, lands that belong to the crown, were also inalienable in 1865. And government lands, yeah, they became accrued during their process. I'm going to continue on for part 3. Stay tuned.